War reveals its truths in strange places, not in speeches, not in propaganda posters, but in the quiet moments, captured diaries, intercepted radio chatter, prisoner interrogations conducted in candlelit rooms long after the guns have gone silent. That is where fear shows itself. That is where respect is confessed. In the early years of the Second World War, the German Wehrmacht believed it understood war better than anyone alive. Its officer corps was educated, disciplined, and steeped in centuries of Prussian military tradition. They had crushed Poland in weeks. They had humiliated France in days. They had driven deep into the Soviet Union with a speed the world had never seen. And when they looked west across the Atlantic, they laughed. The Americans, they believed, were soft. Industrial, yes, but tactically clumsy. A nation of mechanics and merchants, not warriors. Their soldiers were thought to be poorly trained, their officers inexperienced, their generals political appointees who had never faced real opposition. German field reports from 1941 and early 1942 often dismissed American units as predictable, slow, and reliant on overwhelming firepower to compensate for a lack of finesse. For a time, that arrogance survived contact with reality. Then 1943 arrived. North Africa burned under the sun. Sicily became a killing ground of dust and stone. Italy turned into a slow, grinding nightmare of mountains and rivers. And across those battlefields, something changed. German officers began encountering American commanders who did not behave as expected, men who moved faster than doctrine allowed, who attacked at night when the rules said not to, who accepted losses not out of incompetence but calculation. And slowly, quietly, the tone of German intelligence reports shifted. This is not a list built from Allied praise or patriotic myth-making. This story is told through enemy eyes, through what German officers said when they believed history would never listen, through grudging acknowledgments scribbled in memoirs, confessions extracted in captivity, and remarks buried deep in after-action reports. This is the story of the American generals who got inside their heads. Before we descend into the battlefield itself, one name must be addressed and deliberately set aside. Dwight D. Eisenhower. To the German High Command, Eisenhower was feared more than any Allied leader, not because he was a battlefield tactician, but because he was something far more dangerous. He was the man who coordinated the full industrial and military weight of the Western Allies. He was the architect of a war machine that could not be outmaneuvered, outproduced, or exhausted. From Berlin's perspective, Eisenhower was not a general you defeated. He was a force of nature you endured until it crushed you. But this story is not about the architects in distant headquarters. This story is about the men whose names German soldiers whispered in foxholes, the ones whose arrival on a front line changed behavior, changed tactics, changed sleep patterns, the commanders who made the enemy nervous, not months later in planning rooms, but immediately, violently, in the mud. And for many German infantrymen, the first American name that began to carry weight was not famous in Washington. It was spoken with irritation at first, then concern, then fear. Terry de la Mesa Allen. Allen did not look like a general from a parade poster. He drank hard, swore freely, wore his helmet crooked. He encouraged independence, initiative, and aggression to a degree that unsettled even his own superiors. Discipline mattered to Allen, but not the kind that required polish. He wanted fighters, not statues. In North Africa and Sicily, Allen transformed the American 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, into something the Germans had not expected. His obsession was the night. While many commanders on both sides treated darkness as a pause button, Allen treated it as an invitation. He drilled his men relentlessly in night movement, night assaults, and night coordination. German units that believed the evening brought safety learned otherwise. Patrols vanished. Outposts were overrun in silence. Defensive lines dissolved in confusion as American infantry appeared where no one believed they could be. German soldiers began to report something unsettling. The enemy did not rest when the sun went down. They feared the uncertainty more than the casualties. The sense that darkness, once a shield, had become a weapon turned against them. Allen was eventually relieved after Sicily, officially for discipline issues. But the Germans didn't know that, and they didn't care, because when Allen resurfaced later in the war commanding another division, the pattern repeated. Night attacks, sudden pressure, no predictable rhythm, no safe hours. For the German soldier, knowing Allen was across the line meant one thing. Sleep was a luxury you no longer had. If Allen represented controlled chaos, the next man represented something far more disturbing to the German mindset. Precision. Lucian Truscott did not shout. He did not posture. He did not cultivate theatrics. He was a professional in the most dangerous sense of the word. German commanders prided themselves on professionalism, on efficiency, on mastery of craft. And when they encountered Truscott's formations, they recognized something uncomfortably familiar. His troops moved faster than doctrine predicted. His marches were brutal, 4 miles per hour, sustained day after day. What became known as the Truscott Trot allowed his units to appear where German planners believed no Allied force could possibly be on schedule. In Sicily, Truscott's division repeatedly outflanked and outpaced German defenses. In Italy, when the Allied position at Anzio teetered on the edge of catastrophe, Truscott took command at the moment of maximum danger. German counterattacks came in waves: artillery, armor, veteran formations thrown forward to crush the beachhead. They failed, not because of brilliance, not because of luck, but because Truscott did not break. German officers later wrote of the Anzio defense with a tone of frustrated respect. They did not describe flamboyance. They described stubbornness, methodical reinforcement, calm under pressure. A commander who absorbed blows and returned fire without overextending, without panicking, without error. Facing Truscott was not terrifying in the cinematic sense. It was worse. It meant facing someone who would not give you an opening. And as 1944 unfolded, German commanders began to realize something far more troubling. These men were not exceptions. They were becoming the rule. The Americans were learning, adapting, refining. And behind the scenes, new forms of warfare, artillery saturation, airborne shock, and armored exploitation were converging into something the Wehrmacht had never planned to face all at once. By the time German intelligence began hearing certain names repeatedly across different fronts, it was already too late. Because the enemy they had once dismissed was no longer trying to copy German warfare. They were perfecting their own. And in the chapters ahead, we move from the darkness of night assaults and stubborn defenses into something far more devastating. A form of warfare that didn't seek finesse at all, only destruction. For the German soldier, fear was no longer confined to what lurked in the hedgerows or the mountains. By 1944, it also came from above, and from the ground shaking beneath their boots. The Western Allies had discovered something the Wehrmacht could not afford to ignore. Modern war did not require elegance to be effective. It required pressure. Relentless, coordinated, industrial pressure applied until resistance collapsed under its own weight. And no American commander embodied that realization more brutally than James Van Fleet. Van Fleet did not believe in finesse. He believed in certainty. When his formations made contact, the first priority was not maneuver. It was fixation. Pin the enemy. Deny them movement. Then erase them. Artillery was his instrument of choice, and he wielded it with a cold, mathematical precision that terrified those on the receiving end. German veterans later described his barrages not as bombardments, but as storms, unceasing, suffocating, indifferent to terrain or fortification. What made Van Fleet especially unnerving was not simply the volume of fire, but the willingness to sustain it. German doctrine relied on conservation, on careful husbanding of shells and fuel. Van Fleet had no such constraint. His barrages were longer, heavier, and repeated without pause. Positions that might have survived a traditional bombardment simply ceased to exist. German officers spoke of a new reality: ground that could not be defended, trenches that became graves, forests stripped bare. In Normandy and the dense fighting of Western Europe, the knowledge that a Van Fleet command was opposite meant one thing: the earth itself would betray you. But even as the ground war grew increasingly unbearable, another terror unfolded overhead. Day after day the skies darkened. The German Luftwaffe had once ruled the air. In 1940, it had shattered cities and armies alike, but now its pilots watched helplessly as massive formations of American bombers advanced in disciplined geometrical precision. They flew straight, they flew level, they did not flinch. At the center of this transformation was Curtis LeMay. LeMay was not a romantic. He did not speak of chivalry or honor in the air. He spoke of results. He understood that air war was not about dogfights. It was about systems. And systems could be destroyed. Under his leadership, American bombers became flying fortresses, packed tightly into formations that overlapped fields of fire until attacking them became an act of near-suicidal bravery. German fighter aces respected the courage of the crews, but they feared the logic behind them. Even when bombers were lost, more followed. Always more. LeMay insisted on pressing attacks through flak and fighters alike. No evasive maneuvers, no scattered drops. Precision demanded exposure, and exposure was a price he was willing to pay. Oil refineries burned. Rail networks collapsed. Aircraft factories fell silent. German leaders understood the implication with dawning horror. This was not a battle they could win tactically. It was an equation they could not solve. Every week, the bomber streams returned, stripping Germany of its ability to move, to fuel, to fight. The front lines no longer mattered when the heart of the war economy was being carved out from the air. And yet, even this devastation was only part of the nightmare. Because while German commanders struggled to survive the storms of steel and fire, one name kept reappearing in intercepted messages, prisoner interrogations, and frantic intelligence assessments: Patton. George S. Patton, Jr. was something the Germans immediately recognized and deeply resented. He played their game: speed, shock, ruthless exploitation of weakness. Where other Allied commanders advanced cautiously, Patton surged forward. Where doctrine suggested consolidation, he attacked again. His armored formations did not pause to secure flanks. They created new flanks by outrunning the enemy entirely. After the Normandy breakout, Patton's army became a moving disaster for the Wehrmacht. Units that believed they had days to reorganize found American armor already behind them. Command posts were overrun before orders could be issued. Defensive lines existed on maps, but not in reality. German generals wrote of Patton with a mixture of admiration and bitterness. They compared him to their own armored legends. They acknowledged his intuition, his aggression, his instinct for momentum. He did not wait for perfection. He created chaos and thrived inside it. Perhaps most unsettling was his refusal to slow down. Patton attacked at night. He attacked through bad weather. He attacked when logic suggested waiting. German soldiers began to believe that rest itself had become dangerous. One prisoner reportedly summarized the experience simply: "He gives us no peace." So strong was this belief that Patton became a weapon even when he was not fighting. The Allies understood German psychology well enough to exploit it. In the months before D-Day, they deliberately placed Patton in command of a phantom army. Fake tanks, fake camps, fake radio traffic. The Germans believed it completely. They were so convinced that Patton would lead the main invasion that they held critical reserves back, waiting for him to appear where he never would. It was one of the most successful deceptions in military history, and it worked only because of one truth. The Germans feared Patton more than anyone else on the battlefield. By the end of the war, the myth of American inferiority lay in ruins, not because of one man, but because of many, each mastering a different facet of modern warfare. Night became unsafe, artillery became inescapable, the sky became hostile, speed became lethal. The Wehrmacht had faced enemies before, but this time they faced a system commanded by men who understood how to apply pressure without mercy, how to adapt faster than doctrine, and how to turn fear itself into a weapon. And when German officers finally laid down their arms, they carried with them more than defeat. They carried the knowledge that they had underestimated their enemy, that the generals they once mocked had learned their language, and then used it against them. So the question remains, which name would you have feared most? The one who attacked in the dark? The one who never broke? The one who erased the ground beneath you? The one who burned your factories from the sky? Or the one who never stopped coming? History remembers victory, but fear leaves a deeper record, and the Germans left us theirs.